Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
The first national signing day of the 2021 recruiting cycle is officially behind us. The Tide wrapped up yesterday with a pretty impressive performance. So I want to discuss what happened on yesterday with the Tide's recruiting effort. Also discuss what the future could have in store for the Crimson Tide when it comes to attempting to close out their 2021 recruiting class with the bang. Welcome into a fresh brand new episode of The Process Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine. Thank you guys so much for joining me on Touchdown Alabama's YouTube page. Be sure to hit that subscribe button below if you're not subscribed. Also, be sure to leave a like whether you are subscribed or not. So I want to recap National Signing Day, also talk about the future of the Tide's 2021 recruiting class. We are going to start that discussion off with a couple of recruiting updates, so we are going to roll right into that. So with that being said, let's get the process started. I just want to dive into a couple of recruiting updates that happened on yesterday in the mix of the craziness of National Signing Day. The first one is that JT Tuamawala, the 5-star defensive lineman out of Washington, released a top 5 and included the Tide, Ohio State, Washington, Oregon, and USC. Buckeyes and the Tide were the only 2 schools included that were not on the West Coast. It is important that we pay attention to JT Tuamawala's recruitment over the next couple of months heading into the traditional signing period, as he is one of the Tide's top remaining targets. Another guy to pay attention to moving forward for the next 2 months is Jaden Roberts, an offensive lineman out of Texas by the way of North Shore High School. He actually decommitted from the Auburn Tigers on yesterday. He said that he decommitted because him and his family felt that it was the best decision for him because of the head coaching changes that are coming to Auburn. So that is another recruit to pay attention to. Roberts is a guy who the Tide actually got on campus before the NCAA implemented a recruiting dead period. He told me that he had a wonderful conversation with Nick Saban during that visit. He said he could really feel that Nick Saban cared about his players. So I think the Tide's coaching staff has a good standing with Roberts. So I think he is a guy to pay attention to moving forward. Of course, the Tide has a wonderful offensive line class signed officially on yesterday, so it will be pretty interesting to see if they go after Roberts moving forward. But on this episode of The Process, as I said earlier, I want to recap what happened yesterday and also just dig into what the future could look like for the Crimson Tide. Talk a little bit more about JT Tuamawala and Roberts. Well, let's get to the recap of yesterday, which was huge for the Crimson Tide, starting with the fact that they signed all of the recruits who they had verbal commitments from before National Signing Day. This was huge in so many ways. I mean, it shows that Nick Saban and the Tide's coaching staff wants to get these guys locked in as soon as possible. This was the first time that the Tide's coaching staff has signed every recruit who they had a verbal commitment from before National Signing Day. So this was masterful by the Tide's coaching staff. One of the big wins that they happened to experience on yesterday. The 2 biggest wins were the flips, of course, of LSU commits Keanu Coot along with JoJo Earl. Starting with Coot, this was a huge pickup. You're adding a 6'6", 225-pound defensive end who could possibly be a great edge rusher at the next level. A very athletic kid at 6'6", put together a wonderful, impressive senior season at Vero Beach High School in Vero Beach, Florida. Had a great jump off the snap, was able to use those long arms that he possesses to keep offensive linemen off of him. Showed a great wide range of rush moves as well, and once he got into the backfield, he caused some damage. So this was a huge pickup for the Crimson Tide, adding him on with Dallas Turner, Monaco Goodwine, Damon Payne, Tim Keenan III, and Quinn Barnes. The Tide's defensive line class is now looking really impressive. This group looked pretty good heading into National Signing Day, but with the addition of Keanu Coote, along with the possible addition of JT Tuamawala, the Tide's defensive line class could become a huge strength. I think it is now a strength adding on Coote, but adding on JT Tuamawala possibly in the future. The defensive line class for the Tide in this 2021 recruiting cycle will become a huge strength. I think Keanu Coote is just another weapon for the Tide, another huge pickup. It was one of their biggest wins, as I said on yesterday. Then you add JoJo Earl to that elite wide receiver group that you already had. You had the lengthy wideouts in Ja'Cory Brooks and A.J. Hall. Hall bringing that aggressiveness. Then you have Ja'Cory Brooks bringing that elite route running, that wide catch radius. You had Christian Leary bringing that 4.39 40 speed. A kid who destroys angles in the open field. A kid who will run over you because he has more of a thicker frame at 5'11". You add another speedster in JoJo Earl to that impressive group. A guy who has a lot of speed to go along with Christian Leary. You're also looking at a guy in Earl who is very elusive in the open field. One of the top wide receivers in the 2021 recruiting class. So both of those flips were really huge for the Tide on yesterday. And when you look at this class from top to bottom, I think is an argument to be made that it is at least one of the best classes that Nick Saban has ever brought in. I know we hear that every recruiting cycle, it seems, but Nick Saban continues to recruit, continues to hit the recruiting trail hard, despite the global pandemic, despite having to virtually recruit these guys for most of the 2021 recruiting cycle. The Tide's coaching staff did another wonderful job, and you have to pay them their respect for continuing to be effective on the recruiting trail. And depending how this class ends for the Tide during the traditional signing period, this class could be in the discussion for the best class ever. Again, we hear this every year, but Nick Saban continues to recruit an impressive group. I am actually one of the people who likes to make this argument after we see what these guys do in college. I want to see what they put together as a group throughout their college careers. Then we look back and say, that is the best class that Nick Saban has ever brought in. But for the sake of judging them off how they look coming out of high school, this class will most definitely be in the discussion if the Tide can close out this 2021 recruiting class with another huge bang on the second National Signing Day of this 2021 recruiting cycle. But the future could be looking very bright for the Tide. You're looking at a couple of prospects who can add a lot more to the Tide's 2021 recruiting class, starting with Tuamawala, as I said, the 5-star defensive lineman out of Washington. He is definitely someone to pay attention to, another great talent on the defensive line. As I said earlier, I think the addition of Tuamawala could be the piece that turns this defensive line class into a huge strength for the Tide. Looking at another prospect, Terrion Arnold. When you look at Arnold, the Tide is in a good position, but so are the Florida Gators and the Georgia Bulldogs. I think the Tide will have to continue to battle it out with the Gators and with the Bulldogs. Arnold wants to get back on the campus of the University of Alabama before he makes an official decision, but he is still taking his recruitment slow. He still wants to experience the recruitment process, still wants to evaluate all of his options, but the Tide is still in the mix at this moment. In my opinion, it is an argument to be made that they are the leader at this point. But of course, like we seen yesterday, recruiting is very fluent. Things happen very quickly. Things change very rapidly. But the Tide is in a good position with Arnold. He expressed in the past that he wanted to go play football at the next level with Xavier Sorey. As most of you guys know, Sorey did sign a national letter of intent with the Georgia Bulldogs on yesterday. That does not mean that Arnold is just a shoe-in for to sign with the Georgia Bulldogs, but Georgia is in a good position. I'm pretty sure Sorey is going to continue to try to recruit Arnold to the Georgia Bulldogs because they have that wonderful relationship with them, staying very close to one another, with Sorey being from Graceville, Florida, and with Arnold being from Tallahassee. So I'm pretty sure the Georgia Bulldogs will have Sorey continuing to recruit Terrion Arnold because Sorey is expected to enroll early in Athens. So he will be on campus trying to recruit Terrion Arnold. So Arnold's recruitment is another one to pay attention to. You're going to hear a lot about him over the next couple of months. He is one of the top remaining players in the country that are still on the market. So that is another recruit just to keep your eyes on. Pretty sure you guys have been keeping your eyes on Arnold anyway. Another guy to pay attention to is Brian Thomas Jr. It is quite interesting for Thomas because the Tide did pick up another wide receiver on yesterday, but the Tide has shown so much interest in the Louisiana product. It is going to be interesting to see how he looks at the Tide now that they have 4 wide receivers, because that wide receiver room is going to be pretty crowded. I know a lot of fans say, yo, if you don't want to compete, don't come here. But a lot of guys want to play early, and I understand that, especially in the current college football landscape. You want to get on the football field as quickly as possible. So that is something that Brian Thomas Jr. is going to have to consider with the Tide. Possibly going to continue to recruit him hard, with him having LSU, Texas A&M among his top schools at the moment as well. So Brian Thomas Jr. is a guy that is still on the board. I talked about Jaden Roberts as well. Those are the guys who I would pay attention to heading into the next couple of months. But another thing that I would say to pay attention to is a new name. That is something to always keep your eyes on, because you hear about the guys who everyone is talking about, but you have to pay attention to guys who are sliding and sitting under the radar. We saw JoJo Earl basically come out of nowhere over the last couple of hours, basically, on National Signing Day. We saw Keanu Cook's name start to float around during the last couple of weeks heading into National Signing Day. So things change very quickly. Things change very rapidly. The Tide put together a great performance on yesterday of National Signing Day, adding some impressive talent. This 2021 recruiting class got a lot better than it even was before National Signing Day began, from top to bottom, at so many different position groups as well. So that's what I wanted to do today. Recap that the Tide signed all of the guys who they had verbal commitments from before National Signing Day, was able to flip JoJo Earl and Keanu Cook from LSU. 2 big pickups for the Tide here in this 2021 recruiting class. I think we are going to be making that argument once again for the 2021 recruiting cycle. 2021 recruiting class quite possibly being the best class that Nick Saban has ever brought in. That will do it for this episode of The Process Crimson Tide Recruiting. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Be sure to hit that subscribe button before you leave. Also, be sure to leave a like. Then head over to touchdownalabama.com. Pick up your subscription today. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles. Get your hands on our yearly print magazine issue. Also read our in-depth draft projections and also our in-depth scouting report. So be sure to pick up that subscription at touchdownalabama.com. Also be sure to download the Touchdown Alabama app so breaking news notifications can be sent to your mobile device. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine.